joining us. And we're very grateful that you are able to give us a greeting on behalf of the Standing Council of Scottish Chiefs. You're returning again this year, and thank you so much for taking the time to do this.
Not at all. Thank you for inviting me, and to you, Camilla, and John Bellasside, Jamie McGeechan, and all the other organisers. Congratulations on the SNAC conference, and I'm delighted to bring greetings from the Standing Council of Scottish Chiefs. I was interested that it's now called the SNAC rather than the SNALC. I mean, both names are a little bit unwieldy, but it strikes me as a bit of a shame to drop the L word, which is, of course, leadership. I don't know whether that's because nowadays leadership is regarded as elitist and therefore an incorrect word, but I'm sure you have lots of background to that. We don't need to get into it now. But if there's one characteristic that the Scots have had throughout the centuries, and particularly abroad, it is the characteristic of leadership in one form or another. And so just a personal thing on my part, I do regret the loss of that word. Returning to the Standing Council, indeed, greetings from us, greetings from Scotland. I listened in earlier today to one of my fellow chiefs, Charles Bruce, giving a very interesting discussion on Scottish identity, and his discussion after his talk with Gus about the difference between the Scottish identity and Scottish identity more generally. It was very interesting because obviously the conclusion was that Scottish identity comprises very many components. You can't just narrow it down to one thing. And there is a tendency today to try to narrow down Scotland, or to perceive Scotland as essentially a clan place. If we look at Scotland as just a place of the clans, we exclude far too much. The clans element is, in fact, a very small element. Just looking at the composition of the Standing Council of Scottish Chiefs, we have about 130 members. The majority of them are not Highland clan chiefs. And I think a lot of confusion arises in people's minds. They think, right, well, here's a name, it has a chief, therefore it must be a clan. There are a relatively small number of Highland clan chiefs. The majority are from the lowlands, both north and south, and they are heads of families. They're recognized by Lord Lyon as chiefs, but they are chiefs of families, or chiefs of the name, or chiefs of a house. There's a distinction there, and it's not a question of one set being superior to the other, but it is a distinction that needs to be made. Having a chief doesn't mean that it's a chief of a clan. I was watching earlier an episode, probably some of you have seen the distinguished, well, the famous historian and television presenter Neil Oliver on a series he put on television called The Rise of the Clans. And the episode I was watching was particularly about Mary, Queen of Scots. He did it very well. There was a lot of interesting detail, fascinating history, and he told well the story of the power play that was underway, which gradually drove Mary, Queen of Scots deeper and deeper into the ground politically. What I was struck by was that Neil Oliver, for all his scholarship and knowledge and understanding of Scotland, couldn't resist the temptation to make this a story about the clans. In fact, it was a story certainly of rival factions vying for the crown, but he had to fit it into a clan context. In my view, a mistake. Not taking away from his research and his scholarship, but it was an example of feeding a perception. As far as the Standing Council is concerned, let me just give you a couple of illustrations of how we are trying to advance the cause of accuracy or authenticity. It sounds very grand, but most of the work done by the chiefs is done by them as individuals with their own clans and families and their societies, both at home and abroad. But occasionally the Standing Council can come together and push forward a project which has more collective weight. The first of these is to try to reach agreement with the various manufacturers in Scotland. We're starting with Scotland, naturally. If we're really ambitious, we may try to go abroad, but that would be perhaps more difficult. With the manufacturers, to persuade them to respect the heraldic accuracy of their various products. I'm not talking about the manufacturers of this, that, and the next thing, but specifically when they are reproducing the chief's insignia, whether it's crests or arms. And a number of them are very responsible and want to get it right, but you only have to walk down the high street in Edinburgh or elsewhere to see the array of phony goods on offer. It occurred to us that not only for the purity, if you like, or the general desire to get things right, but also as a service to our own kindred, whether at home or overseas, that when they are buying something, it is right. We're not arbiters of quality, but we need to be arbiters of accuracy. And I'm glad to say that we have our first contract nearly ready to go with one of Scotland's most reputable manufacturers, Art Pewter Silver. And from then, I've had personal discussions, informal discussions with other manufacturers, for example, Gaelic Themes in Glasgow and Scott Clans in Edinburgh. But we're starting with Art Pewter Silver, and we hope that in the new year, we will have an arrangement where in return for us having scrutinized the designs that they have for the various crests in particular, and we've done that. There are only 4 chiefs actually who have asked for corrections to their designs. And in return for the accuracy provided by the manufacturer, we will allow them to promote or to use the 3 feathers, which is the chief's symbol, and wording heraldic authenticity certified by the Standing Council of Scottish Chiefs when they produce their various items. So it's a win-win situation. That's the idea, starting with Art Pewter Silver, and I hope in the year to come to move on to the other manufacturers. I repeat, the idea is both for accuracy for its own sake, but also so that people have a choice. They can go and buy something that looks pretty or is relatively cheap or whatever, might be expensive, or they can go for something that is genuine. Our job is to give people choice and some guidance. The second project that I've been involved in together with a number of the other chiefs is the idea of a book. There have been many books published on Scottish history, and in particular, the history of the clans and the families. One might think this is an overworked market. In a way it is. There are so many scholars, academics, journalists of varying quality that have produced over the years various books on this theme. For the first time, the chiefs would be writing a book in their own words, telling the story of their name, their kindred, well illustrated, but also folding in the more legendary stories, the myths, the heroic deeds, the bardic tales. So we're hoping to produce a book that will be of general interest, certainly very high quality, but crucially, and this would be a unique factor, unprecedented in fact, for each chief in their own words to say what the real story is. That's something that we're working on at the moment. We hope to, if it succeeds, that we hope to be able to bring it out in the course of next year, which of course is the year of Scotland's stories. We've still got a lot of work to do, but I wanted to mention it to people because it fits with my theme of this evening of us searching for greater accuracy, greater authenticity. Most chiefs are not scholars, but they can draw on extraordinary resources, not least the legacy that they have received from previous generations. They are in a way better placed than many other to say what is right and what is bogus. So look out for the Chief's book. And if any of you listening to this are a member of a clan society or family association, and you're curious about this, do contact your chief and ask them if they've signed up to it yet, because I'm looking for more authors. Which brings me back finally to Neil Oliver and the question of the temptation of folding so many things that are Scottish into a clan framework, which I think risks being misleading. I'm not making a personal attack on Neil Oliver, either as a historian or indeed a presenter. But as I said at the beginning, I was struck by how he couldn't resist the temptation to put the power struggle in the late 16th century against Mary, Queen of Scots, into a clan context. And time and again, he was referring to how the clans were at war with each other, feuding, jockeying for position in order to pursue their various claims or pretensions to the crown. The four characters he focused on, interestingly, were Morton, Lennox, Huntley, and Bothwell. Now, they, as members of the nobility, were indeed heads of their name. You could even say that they were chiefs in some way or another, but I think that they probably would not, that would not be a word that would spring to their mind at the time, but certainly heads of the name. And yet, that was translated. These four were vying and jockeying and betraying each other. And against a background, of course, of a great sort of tectonic struggle between Presbyterianism and Catholicism. But it was presented as a rivalry between the clans. I think that a serious approach to Scotland as a whole, and certainly to our history, requires us to look beyond this rather romantic and rather convenient way of looking at ourselves purely through the lens of clanship. We don't need to recreate our history or Scotland in order to celebrate it. We can celebrate our stories, our culture, our land without recreating it. And I would hope that Robert Burns, who I think is on next, and was not a member of any clan, would tend to agree. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that. And now I hand over to John Belisai to take us forward. And thank you so much, Donald.
Not at all, thank you.
Good afternoon, Donald. I just want to say hello.
Hello, John.
I mentioned yesterday during a session I was moderating, a special relationship between my organization, COSCA, and yours, the Standing Council, how symbiotic it is. We represent the clan and family associations in the States, and of course, you represent their chiefs in Scotland. The same can be said for CASIC, and I'm sure Bill would agree. The closeness that's developed between our relationships, especially in the last decade, is a very encouraging one. And the ability to see you and talk with you remotely like this, and not just wait for the occasional times you come to the States when we have in fact met and talked, is a great, I think, advance. I had two questions for you very quickly, things
Yes.
we've touched on. If you could say a little something about your heirs project, I think is what you're calling it. I've been in touch with Lord Bruce recently. We're going to help him conduct a survey. We've already started it, of what clan and family association members in the States and COSCA would like to see in terms of better communications between their chiefs and their heirs in Scotland. Maybe you could say something about that. And my second question was really, when do you expect your book to be out? Because COSCA had agreed to help you distribute it.
Thank you, John. Very good to be in contact again. Yes, the heirs, every chief likes to think he's immortal, and I'm sure really we are, but reality might catch up with us, and we have actually been giving more thought to what comes next, to our heirs, to our successors, and for some time we've been discussing forming a group of heirs to not only make contact with each other, to discuss projects between themselves, ranging from historical matters to the very practical matters. How do you keep the slates on the roof? I mean, if you're running a family home or even a business, if you don't have great ancestral lands, the heirs, being of a younger generation, can exchange ideas, So there's a great pool of encouragement there, a great pool of ideas. And I asked Charles Bruce who's the most senior heir. Charles will not forgive me for this, but in fact, he is probably the oldest heir, but senior also in terms of name, at least he has a claim to that, to be the coordinator of the heirs, what we call the heirs steering group. It doesn't comprise all the heirs yet. We're trying to get as many as possible to join. And Charles is running with this, and I'm very pleased that just in the last couple of months, he's been in touch with yourselves, and it's all part of the idea of cross-fertilization, getting new ideas. What are the heirs' responsibilities? What should they be looking to do? Encouraging them to visit overseas more, instead of just their parents, actually putting themselves forward as possibly as chieftains of the games. They may not yet be chiefs themselves, but they can still be chieftain of the games. And so that work is underway, and we're very pleased, John, that COSCA, and I'm sure that Bill from CASOC and also our colleagues in the Scottish Australian Heritage Council would welcome this development as well. Very pleased that you've given encouragement to that particular formation of that group and to open up the lines of communication with us. Thank you. And on the book, we're still recruiting chiefs. We've got about a third of our membership. There's a limit to how many chiefs could be part of this book without running into a second volume, just in simple logistical publishers terms. But we're getting close to the number of chiefs that we would like to have. There are also some quite senior Scottish names involved. I wouldn't say big because size isn't everything. I know I'm talking to a North American audience, but some serious and fully committed chiefs. We've got a good number who've signed up to write the chapter on their name, which is excellent. I'm hoping that by the end of this year, I will have got a fuller idea of the numbers of chiefs involved. Then up until the spring would be the time when we'd be encouraging them to write, to actually put pen to paper and be in touch with the publishers who have offered on the editing front to help format. We're not trying to have a consistent product. Each chief would have their own chapter and they tell the story in their own words. But the publishers are there as consultants, really, to ensure that the quality is of a high and consistent standard. And then if that goes well, the publishers need about 3 months to actually get it out. So the ideal is to have the book ready by midsummer. Of course, Grandfather Mountain, it would be great to have it ready by the time of Grandfather Mountain. That's early July. We're not yet able to give precision to the timetable, but certainly in the course of next year is what we're hoping for, ideally the first half. And of course, it is the Year of Scotland Stories, as I mentioned, so it times very well with that particular themed year.
Well, as I had indicated to you previously, and I just want to let everyone who's online know, COSCA and perhaps other groups will be assisting you in getting that disseminated when it's ready, whether it's at Grandfather Mountain this year, hopefully it is this coming year, or the following year. That's the place that most of the clan and family societies gather stateside, about 120 of them. It's the ideal place for all the reasons that Peter Wilson in the last session outlined. To make a distribution, and that we stand ready to help you do that. So,
well, John, I'm very grateful to you for that. You and I spoke informally about this just a few weeks ago, and I'm really pleased that you've launched the idea amongst your membership. It'll be very important to help us with the distribution. It's one thing getting quantities of books over to North America. It's another thing getting it spread out. And I think we will be looking for volunteers to help us with that. But can I just finish by repeating that if any of you who are listening to this are interested in the idea of the book and are wondering, is my name going to be in it? Is my chief one of the authors who will be writing one of the chapters? Do please find out from your chief. And if not, say to them, well, why not? And let me know, because I'd be quite happy to pick up the phone and try and drum up a few more chiefs. It's very easy to sit back and say, oh, well, you know, plenty of stuff has already been written by others. Why should I bother? This is the first time the chiefs have an opportunity to write their story in their own words. The more we get, the more authentic and the more impact it will have.
Well, thank you so much, sir, for joining us again this year. We appreciate your time with us, and we'll certainly be in touch. I think